what people may or may not understand about entrepreneurship and leading a business is just how taxing it can be.
It can be a very lonely journey when you're running your own business. I think especially for entrepreneurs, and maybe I'm on thin ice here or not, I don't know, but I think especially for women entrepreneurs who are in charge of a family and raising children oftentimes.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Unapologetically Yours podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Logan, and I'm so happy to have you here today. Unapologetically Yours is a podcast where we go deep on everything from spirituality to relationship and connection to business and belief systems. Because in a world when we've been taught to play by the rules, it's time to live unapologetically, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm so happy to have one of my favorite people here as a guest today. This man has been my mentor for really, I'm coming on 5 years, starting in the pandemic.
Yeah.
I know, which is crazy. And we were matched through a mentorship program, and we took a personality test to see how we'd get along, and more on that later. But long story short, for several years, we have met once a month to talk about everything from our businesses to life to goal setting and beyond. So I'd like to formally introduce Bruce Taylor. He is the former president of Cole Taylor Bank based here in Chicago and the founder of the Next Level Exchange.
Well, it's very nice to be here and to see you in a totally different context. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And thank you for being one of the 10 people who listen to this podcast on a regular basis.
I'm there for you. I get a lot out of them.
Well, I appreciate that. So I'm part of an organization called EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. I've talked about it on the show before. And Bruce is a member of an organization called YPO, and YPO Gold now.
Yes.
And what those organizations have in common are bringing like-minded leaders of businesses together in learning, in camaraderie, in sharing of information. And I grew up, because my dad was a member of YPO, and had exposure to how beneficial these relationships can be and how important. So what made you want to become a mentor?
That's a good question. I think overall, I feel like I've been very fortunate in the opportunity to grow up with two very significant mentors in my life. Not that they were formal, but the informal mentorship can be very important. And my father and my grandfather. And the opportunity that I had through them to learn, to listen to conversations, to get the benefit of their experiences was huge. So fast forward now 60 some years. And in addition to wanting to give back in a meaningful way and share the experiences, because we've had through our family business in the banking business, we had some really positive successes, and we had some really nightmarish challenges that we had to go through. It's a roller coaster ride when you're running your own business.
Yeah.
And wanting to share and kind of give back uniquely what I've learned through my experiences of the things that were successful and sharing the mistakes that I've made and what I learned from those mistakes. I say that tongue in cheek, but there were plenty of mistakes. And doing it for the benefit of somebody else, it just is one of really the highlights of this stage of my life. In addition to that, the relationships that you establish through the mentoring programs I'm involved with have been extremely meaningful. And we can get more into that, but it's a wonderful way to give back.
Yeah. Well, I think that what people may or may not understand about entrepreneurship and leading a business is just how taxing it can be emotionally, spiritually, physically, all across the board. And the importance of building community and not trying to be the smartest person in the room, but surrounding yourself with people who can maybe help guide or can help take the load off or just commiserate in the day-to-day. It's really meaningful.
Absolutely. And it can be a very lonely journey when you're running your own business. I think especially for entrepreneurs, and maybe I'm on thin ice here or not, I don't know, but I think especially for women entrepreneurs who are in charge of a family and raising children oftentimes. And I am amazed at, the demands that are being placed on them and their ability to continue to build a business and navigate all of the challenges that is involved in that, as they're also maybe primarily responsible for children in the home and so forth. So I'm not sure when Ashley Logan actually sleeps, but there's a lot on your plate. But again, it can be lonely, and having somebody who can be an advocate, an advisor, somebody to share or bounce ideas off of can be meaningful.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that one of the highlights of my business experience has been working with you. And
that's nice of you to say.
Oh, it's true. Well, people will be like, "Oh, okay, so you've got lunch with your mentor." And I'm like, "You mean my best friend Bruce?"
One of the things you mentioned, and this is funny, and I still remember this from when we first met, this culture index, personality test, and why they matched us, because we have some similarities. Sorry about that, Ashley, but you have some similarities to me. But we actually learned we both like to talk a lot and enjoy and meet people and get to know what makes people tick and so forth. And we were advised to not let our discussions devolve into something that is great conversation, but we never get anything done. But I think we kind of navigate that pretty well. So
I think so. We figured out how we go and then we make our way back.
Right.
So what do you think in your experience are the key components of a mentor relationship?
First of all, it's a willingness to be an advocate and to meet the mentee that you're working with where they're at, not based on my expectation. I'm not a director of that business. I'm not a lender. I'm not an investor. It's really about meeting the entrepreneur where they're at, and then understanding how I can best advocate, how I can be a really good listener, ask some good questions, and provide some, whether it's access to my social network or resources that I'm aware of. But I think at the end of the day, being flexible, resourceful, willing to also learn from the mentee, because I've learned a lot from you over time, and just being that advocate, for the business owner that you're working with.
Yeah, I think that's so true.
So,
well, I've learned a lot from you as well. And I think the other thing that I would add to that is consistency. So every time that we end a meeting, we make sure to schedule the next session. So it's on the books and that we're...
Yeah, you're always on the hook to meet with me.
Always on the hook.
One of the important things you do that I appreciate, and I think it's important in a mentoring relationship, is you spend a little bit of time at least to prepare an agenda before our meetings. Now, that may be, I don't know, I'm guessing you don't sweat about it for 24 hours, but maybe a few minutes before. But I think that helps give our discussion a little bit of structure.
Yeah.
And so it gives you the opportunity to think about what are the most important things you want to discuss. What's the takeaway you want to take from any particular meeting?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. And, I don't necessarily have all the answers. I mean, and no mentor is going to have all the answers, but, having the opportunity to discuss things that may be a little uncomfortable or difficult to discuss because it exposes a vulnerability, it's important. And even if I can't respond or provide some meaningful feedback, there are people that I know that I hopefully could talk to, tap into, that could fill a gap that maybe I can't necessarily fill.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too that I think is important and that you're great about is not necessarily giving advice, but asking questions to help people thoughtfully consider. So how do you think that people in entrepreneur leader types, how do they react to giving advice?
First of all, I don't think a role of a mentor is to tell the mentee what to do. It's your business, you know it. And I found out through my career, there's more than one way. There's more than my way to get something accomplished and something meaningful and positive accomplished. So I think that has to be done in a very judicious way. I mean, I can share an experience of, if there's a particular topic, and I can share what I did and what the result was, whether it was good, bad, or indifferent. But I don't think, as successful as anybody has been in their business career, there have been plenty of mistakes, and there are other ways to get things accomplished. And to think that somebody has the one right way to make something happen is probably not actually true. There are many ways to get things done. And, as when I thought I was on the right course of doing something and realized it wasn't necessarily the right course and not going to produce the results I wanted, that makes me very aware today to be very careful about telling anybody what to do in their business. You know it better than anybody. So, I can lob in advice sometimes from the grandstands, but, you're the one that has to live with it, execute, and know all the different aspects of, what possibly would make it a good decision or not a good decision or course of action.
Sure.
So,
Well, and also like advising people, it creates sort of an emotional hierarchy, I think, to some extent, where that one person knows better than the other. And I think that that most people sort of tense up when someone starts telling them what to do or giving should statements, how they should do something or what they should not do. And I think about how through these entrepreneur organizations and the sort of coaching that they provide around interacting with one another as peers and mentorships, and is the Gestalt type mindset where you're not necessarily taking that hierarchical position of looking down and telling someone what to do or not do. But this extends so much beyond just business relationships and into personal relationships too. And I think it's hard for us type A type people who like to get shit done to not try to control other people's outcomes.
Yeah, I think people naturally, I think, especially an entrepreneur, a founder of a business owner, get fairly defensive when you tell them what to do, right? And I'll reiterate maybe in a slightly different way. I don't know all of the players in your company and clients that you serve and the demands that are being made by various stakeholders. I wouldn't know that necessarily in any mentor-mentee relationship. You know that as best. So I can jump to a conclusion, tell you what to do, and miss some very important aspects that are kind of rate limiting factors when you have to decide what's the right thing to do, what's the right course of action to take. But I will say one of the things that I've noticed, I think it's 2 points related to this. One is the mentees that I've worked with that have been most successful are those that are like sponges, and I know I'm not the only person giving advice to you or to some of the other mentees I work with. That's so much smarter than I was when I was growing up in my career, because I felt like if I couldn't know the answer myself, then I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing. But that's absolutely wrong. The willingness to seek advice and input from others, I think, is one of the critical success factors for success in starting up and running your own business. I think you do that. Some of the other mentees that I work with do that. So I think, getting that input from different sources, I think, is really important. There's another interesting aspect about, I think, being a good mentor, and that is, I don't know if my adult children, who are now in their 40s and mid-30s, will be listening to this podcast, but it has made me a better parent to my adult children, where I can consciously take the tape out of my head that deals with them as teenagers and puts in the tape with dealing with them as, professionals, responsible adults, people who are, accomplished in their own way. I get a lot further with my children not telling them what to do or accusing them of doing something like they always did when they were in high school, but asking good questions, sharing experiences, and letting them talk through the situations that they're involved with. It opens the conversation up, I would say, to new possibilities,
Yeah.
new thoughts, new ideas.
Yeah.
So, and instead of shutting somebody down with a wall of advice, which is what it really is, it creates a wall.
Well, so one of the things I think about is being part of these entrepreneur organizations like YPO or EO, prestigious organizations with very, very well connected people. And so naturally, through that, it allows people to uplift one another at this playing field. And that's to the benefit of the business community at large and to communities at large. But one of the things I think about a lot, and I know you do too, is how to bring up other entrepreneurs or business owners, maybe who don't have the same access to these organizations, who don't have the same access to incredible mentors who can help pave the way, either because their socioeconomic status and they weren't born in a position where they automatically know people who are more connected or have other barriers. So tell me a little bit about how you feel about bringing other entrepreneurs up in the world.
Yeah, well, as you know, I was born and raised raised my family all in the Chicago area. I love Chicago, even in the winter. I love Chicago, when I left my full-time role at the bank back in 2014, I wanted to give back in a lot of ways, but in one way in particular, in helping create more economic opportunity throughout all of Chicago. And through a fair amount of networking and discovery, I met a woman who was running the entrepreneurship program at the Chicago Urban League. And as I learned, there are many different organizations in the city that are supporting a very diverse group of emerging business owners and entrepreneurs. And she had mentioned to me that the one thing she had not yet been able to accomplish was a mentoring program. And I said, aha.
Wait, you know a thing or two about mentoring.
I have an idea. And this is in 2017, we launched our first group. I think it can be incredibly...
And this is through... So this led you to founding the Next Level Exchange.
So we started with the Chicago Urban League, then Sunshine Enterprises joined us, and then about a year later, the Women's Business Development Center. And I just think we have found a very meaningful way for established business professionals, business owners to give back uniquely, their gifts of their experience, their skills, their networks, their resources to a group that, as we are more successful and as they are more successful, become very vested in this entrepreneurial experience we have all had, so many of us in so many different communities that make Chicago what it is. The established business community here in Chicago giving back in a very unique way can make a significant impact over time and helping these business owners and their businesses become more successful more quickly, whether that's creating jobs, careers, wealth, within their own community. I've seen this in many other communities here in Chicago, what that entrepreneurial experience is like over the course of multiple generations. And I think they can have the same type of impact throughout all of the Chicago area, and especially in areas and neighborhoods that are either overlooked or under-resourced currently. And there's a lot of great ideas, a lot of very energetic people who are working hard to establish businesses within these communities, and not all of them are going to be successful. That's true in any community. Being a banker, I saw plenty of people with what maybe you would call a lot of privilege, not end up being successful in their business ventures, but some of them will be. And I think one of the most important things that you get out of successful entrepreneurs is role models for others to follow. I mean, one of the things that I'm most proud about regarding our program is when we ask one of our mentees to become a mentor because of their experience and what they've learned and what they have achieved. Now, it's a very hard sell because entrepreneurs are really busy, and these people are running around spinning a lot of plates at the
Whatever
same
do you
time.
mean?
Yeah, really, you would have no idea,
No
right?
idea.
But they're such important role models, like the role models that I had, not only of my father and my grandfather, but the people in and around the community that I grew up in, and was able to define what success can look like following an entrepreneurial or business career.
Yeah. I mean, I think that what's so cool about what you did was you took the experience that you had of one being mentored by those in your life and then also being a mentor to other entrepreneurs and then created that roadmap to extend to communities with less resources.
Right.
And then you formally built that program. Tell me a little bit more about how the organization has grown and how people listening can get involved.
Yeah, so we are the Next Level Exchange. You can find us at nextlevelexchange.org on the internet. We're always looking for mentors. We're always looking for new mentees. One of the interesting aspects about this, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, is this is a collaborative effort across more than one nonprofit organization supporting entrepreneurs. We have probably paired close to 300 mentors and mentees since the start. This past year was really, I think, the beginning of an inflection point for the program when we actually hired our first full-time program director, who's doing a marvelous job.
Shout out to Amy.
Hey, hi, Amy. You're doing a great job. And so as we continue to build the program, not only in terms of scale and the number of people we touch, but also the value we add, where we can help identify business opportunities for the mentees, continue to create meaningful networking opportunities, educational opportunities, and can hear from and to allow the entrepreneurs in the program to hear from successful business owners about their journey. I know I got that experience a lot in YPO when they had something called in the boardroom type luncheon discussions, where somebody would talk about, how they built their business and the ups and downs. I think those are important learnings and opportunities for learning that we can share with the participants in the program.
So, first of all, I think it's just amazing that you built this from the ground up and have found sort of this pathway for entrepreneurs of all levels to give back. And that's really impressive because it matters. And so, what do you think are some of the benefits for the community around uplifting business owners and new ventures?
Somebody once asked me at a planning session for this program several years ago. So why are you doing it? Why is this important to you? And I think at the end of the day, it really is about I get a better place to live. When there's more economic opportunity, more career opportunity, more wealth creation opportunity throughout all of Chicago, every one of us, whether you live in the suburbs or in the city on the north side or the south side, is going to end up with a better home. Because the reverse is also true. When there are challenges in our community, it affects all of us. It may not affect us at that moment, but affects opportunity, I think, for everybody here in Chicago. So I think we get a better home. We get more economic opportunity. We have more people who are invested in what I think is one of the greatest expressions of liberty. Don't want to get all mushy here, but liberty in America, and that is the opportunity to start and build a business and to earn the rewards from a successful journey of building a business. So more people invested in that, and I also think when you create ultimately a critical mass of successful businesses in any community, it begins to build on itself. Yeah. And it creates opportunities sort of like this flywheel concept that I think Stephen Covey, or was in Good to Great, one of those books, had mentioned that, it creates this critical mass of continuing activity.
So when we're looking at the entrepreneurial landscape, are all opportunities created equal?
Oh, absolutely not. No, there are some businesses that are much more difficult, at least from my observation as a banker. Our focus as a company was working with owner-operated, family-owned businesses. And I saw that there are some industries and types of businesses that are just harder. Subcontracting in the construction business can be very difficult.
Yeah.
As an example, being a contractor in general, with major contracts that you have to manage over the course of time, could be multiple months to over a year. Managing large contracts, construction projects can be very difficult. So no, I mean, there are different opportunities, are, it doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't pursue them, but they're going to have inherent in them some different risks and different challenges. Real estate's a good example. Real estate can be a feast and famine business. I mean, we learned that during the financial crisis, the Great Recession in 2008. Home building, it basically falls off a cliff. And we did experience that in spades. But so that, real estate can be very lucrative, can be a very positive career, but also just to be aware that it can be also very volatile.
So what advice do you have for someone who's just getting started on their entrepreneurial journey? Because I know there's a lot of people listening who have a seed that's planted in their mind that maybe they're haven't taken that first step on yet. And so what do you have to say to that person?
This is not the easy path. Being an entrepreneur is not the easy path. It is, in many respects, the harder path. Because if the owner doesn't get it done, oftentimes it doesn't get done, whatever that done is. Realizing that it is a challenge, it's a journey, it's a lifestyle choice. I know when I was running the business, I never really left the company. I was thinking about it all the time, oftentimes dreaming about it. My father coined a term about the 3 o'clock in the morning sweats he would get, waking up worrying about the latest series of problems that might have been occurring. So
I'm laughing to myself because for the last 3 nights I have had 3 a.m.
Well, you just may be sick, but hopefully.
Probably a combination of a bunch of things, but the political turmoil.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily easy. It can be a hard path, but it also can be an incredibly rewarding path. I mean, the opportunity to be your own boss, the opportunity to build something that has never existed before, the opportunity to be very creative. It's going to take a lot of perseverance, a lot of energy. I would suggest get a lot of input, get a lot of help, find advisors, friends, peers, mentors who can help you along the way. Oftentimes, testing your idea out while you may be working full-time in one job, but finding ways to test something out to see if it's viable, if that's a possibility, whether it's a retail concept of some type or some consulting or advising type of business, to see if you can generate the number one thing to generate, obviously, is revenue. So can you begin to generate the revenue that will give you a chance to sustain and build a business?
It's so true. I mean, and right now, not that you're suggesting that someone leans on the corporate dollar to go ahead and get started on something else. But by the way, that's a really good strategy. While you're gainfully employed, I don't want to tell people to not go the extra mile working those late hours at their day job, but at the same time, if you're passionate about something, you have a seed that's planted and you want to get something done. It's never been easier. There's never been more resources to do that because it's easy to build a website. It's easy to, I don't want to suggest that it's easy to start a business, but the word side hustle is something that people understand.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I feel busted, so I'm busted. But no, there are many businesses, and this goes back even prior times, that get started at night or on the weekends. Yeah, I'm not suggesting you don't do your job for,
Well,
that
yeah, I mean,
your day job.
that's how I started
Yeah.
with Yakety Yak. Actually, kind of funny because I had started Yakety Yak, but I was working at an agency and I was freelancing for the Sun Times, and they all knew about each other. So when I had downtime at the agency, I was working on my own business and then freelancing in the meantime. And I gradually dropped those other parts till I was full time with Yakety Yak.
It can start as a hobby. If you're thinking about baking and wanting to open a bakery, you can start that somewhat out of your own home kitchen or as a bakery, as a hobby, and kind of build it from there. And I know we've had several salon owners who've started doing hair salon services in their homes on the weekends before they went out and took the leap to leave their current full-time employment and start their own full-time salon business. So those are a couple of examples I think about. It also is interesting to me when I think about some of the customers that we dealt with at the bank that I loved. And one that I think of was a letter envelope converter. I won't say their name because they might get upset with me, but I love this customer and the story about how they started their business in their garage, with one little machine, and were able to persevere, to be resourceful, and to build, what has become a multi-million dollar business. So there are a lot of these businesses that are very well established, well known, that got very meager starts, in somebody's garage.
Well, I think that part of that too is that when we have such a mindset around performance and revenue and growth and all of those things, and it's really part of our capitalistic culture, that sometimes it can be intimidating to start something because people will be like, okay, well, what are you going to do with that? And ask a lot of questions about how it's going to grow and where it's going to be in the future. And I think it's okay to get started without necessarily having those answers and taking all of those little wins in stride, because those little wins are really important. And a collection of little wins builds a foundation for growth and other things. So I totally agree with you that starting in the garage, starting in the home kitchen, all of that, it's a start and should be celebrated. But starting off and thinking that you need to be up here can be a really big barrier for just taking the baby steps to start.
Yeah. And, there's a lot of on-the-job learning that occurs when you're running, I don't care what business, the life changes, circumstances change. I think about the wonderful job some of our mentees did as COVID broke out and all the shutdowns, and how they pivoted so quickly to morph their business into something that could survive, a huge shock to them. But that's not something anybody plans for. And you don't necessarily need to have a very fancy, glossy operating plan every year. Having somewhat of a plan, having some objectives and how you're going to achieve them is important. But you can probably do that on a page, maybe at most two. But the doing is really important, and learning from the doing is also really important, and what's working and what's not working. And that's also, I think, what's important, going back to not giving advice. I mean, you have more contact with your clients and what they like and what they don't like. I felt that way about our bank customers. They let us know what the competition was doing. They let us know where we were doing well and maybe where we were falling short. So that type of information and your connection to your clients and other stakeholders is really critical in learning on the job. Mm-hmm. I'll just put it that way.
I think taking the time to reflect is important. But more than that, and that goes back to the mentee-mentor relationship, is that it is a moment of reflection when you're coming together and sharing your updates and have a chance to respond to questions that someone's asking about your business and about you as the whole person. I think that that's one of the things I value so much about you, is that when you're asking me questions about my business and we're checking in, it's a great chance for me to reflect on, okay, what is actually true about my business right now? What is true about the direction? What are the opportunities? What are the things I'm missing? But you're asking me those questions not as someone who is a stakeholder in the business who's tied to its performance, but an advocate of me, the person, the whole person who is not just a business owner, but an entrepreneur and, podcast host and fire starter and all sorts of
And
other
all that good stuff.
all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But it's nice to have someone who can see the full picture and then ask questions to support the full picture.
Yeah. As you were talking, I was, what came to mind was work-life balance. And one of the, I think a really successful mentoring relationship not only deals with the business, but what's going on in the mentors and mentees' personal lives. Because I've said this a lot over the course of time, that when you are running your own business, what happens in your personal life affects your business, and what happens in the business impacts your personal life. You can't really separate the two. So having the willingness and openness to deal with both sides of, what makes you the whole person that you are. And part of that, one that comes to mind is work-life balance, and how do you get it? That was important when I was coming up in my career, and it's equally important now. And it surprises me sometimes what small shifts can do in terms of the impact, the big impact that they can have. I'll give you one example.
Yeah, tell us about that. Because I don't know if you guys listen, like, Bruce, you ran one of the largest banks in the Midwest, and it was eventually sold to
we merged with MB, and then we all merged with Fifth Third.
Okay. And a family business, a legacy business, you were under a lot of pressure when you were running this organization. So, and you had 3 kids.
Well, I had a very supportive spouse, and Barbie was great. We had we organized ourselves in a very traditional way. That enabled me to spend a lot of time, at work. Looking back now, I'm thinking, well, maybe I didn't have to spend all that time. I think one of the benefits of maybe today's world, FaceTime is less important, but that may be for a different episode for you. But the one change that I made, because it was, when our kids were little, and so I'm thinking in the late 80s, early 90s, I would work 6 days a week. It made a huge difference when I started coming home for lunch on Saturdays. That it was just, at least for me, I don't know about I think also for Barbie and the kids, that I left work and just spent that rest of that day with the family and took some of the burden off of Barbie, and obviously took Sunday off. I never got to the end of the to-do list. I think that's another issue we should talk about at another episode. But there's always something to do. That situation struck me as it was a little change that had a very big impact in improving family relationships. So,
one of the things that I really appreciate about you is your capacity for curiosity, always learning new things, you're open-minded to new perspectives. What's something that, had you known now, that you would have done differently?
Well, you know what? There's this saying about give credit and take responsibility. Another way that I think about that is catching people doing things right. I would have done a lot more of that. I mean, there were times when I felt the weight of the world was on my shoulders running our company, when things weren't going well. And it was hard for me to do that. But if I were to do something different now, as being my genuine, interested, curious self, but also catching people doing something right, encouraging them, being positive with them. Yet it doesn't mean that you don't address issues that might be coming up. When you feel the weight of the world is on your shoulders, it's hard to do that. When you're worried and concerned and overwhelmed, it's sometimes hard to give that credit and give that positive feedback to people as much as you possibly can. I would definitely have done that. It's so much about finding the right people. And that's the hardest, I think, part of almost every business, is getting the right people in the right places in the company. We weren't always successful about it. And oftentimes, we hired some big name professionals in the banking business that didn't work out so well. But I would say the last 6 to 8 years of the company before we merged. We had a wonderful opportunity. If I could boil my career down to two decisions I made, one of them was bringing in a whole team of bankers and executives from our primary competitor who did a wonderful job. They were great people.
The opportunities that arose from the financial crisis of
Crisis.
2007,
Yeah,
2008.
you know what? Thank God
Yeah.
we were smart enough to take advantage of
Yeah.
it. And they
Being
they did
opportunistic.
they did
And
a
gutsy.
wonderful job. You know, sometimes keeping your eyes open and changing your plan when an opportunity arises, you know, is as important as identifying a risk and trying to mitigate it as best you can. So I think, and also even with mentorship, there's also, I would guess, you know, as you observe, anyone observes people they've worked for, what they do that they like and what they do that they really don't like. Those are important learnings too, to kind of tuck away. What do you like? What your boss does for you, and what do you really don't like? And I think those are important learnings too. So, in any event, people are really important
People
and
are
hard to get it right.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
Amen to that. They are the most important part of a business, and they are. It's hard to get right. I chew on that a little bit because I think for anyone who's looking to build a team, doing things like taking a personality test, like Culture Index, so you could know that you're a good match, is important, especially as you think about like role allocation and different things like that in the scaling part. Going back to the next level exchange. So right now you have had over 300 pairings of mentee mentors, and which is making a huge difference in the business landscape in the city of Chicago. And so what are your goals over the next couple of years, and what qualifies someone to be a mentee or a mentor if should they want to be involved in the program?
Can I mention something first before I answer your question?
Of course.
So one of the additional benefits of this program is the relationships that are being created between people who would have otherwise never met one another. From different communities, different cultures. There are so many walls that exist in our city, in our area, that these bridges being built between these different individuals and the communities they represent. We've heard from our mentors, it's one of the most valuable things they get out of participating in the program. You know, that's been
sense of
very
community is so important.
That's been very rewarding to see happen, and the commitment so many people in the established business community have towards this program and the mentees they're working with. With the entrepreneurs, the mentees that we work with, we're generally looking for people who've been in business for a couple years, who either have made it their full-time job or are considering making it their full-time job. And so generally at least $25,000 a year in sales. But we also make exceptions, and those exceptions are based on the organization that they come through and how they to enter in the program, one of the three partner organizations. If they feel that they're ready, then we'll make the exception and make sure that we find hopefully the best mentor we can for them. And that's, again, the Urban League, Women's Business Development Center, and Sunshine Enterprises. That's where about 90% currently of our mentees come from. The mentors are people who have been in business for about 10 years, who've had either some extensive professional experience or managerial experience or ownership experience. And it's a very diverse group. I mean, even just age demographic. I think that one of the youngest mentors we had was in his young 30s, and some of the mentors we have are in their 70s. We have a lot of women, we have a lot of men, we have mentors of color. So it's a very diverse group. And so, we're fortunate. And that was one of the litmus tests for me about the sustainability of this program, is to continue to attract people in the traditional business community to give back in this very meaningful way. Yeah. So, as far as what I hope, like I said, I hope we will add more organizations to this to this effort, we'll see more success that's very tangible and very meaningful. I've mentioned to you before a woman who I've mentored, who founded Ladies of Virtue when we first started. She had only volunteer help, and now I think she has a staff of close to 10 or maybe more people that she's paying because of the expansion and growth of her nonprofit program. More stories like that, more opportunities that we're giving the entrepreneurs in the program to find new markets and new opportunities for them to do business, not only within their community, but outside their community, if that's the interest of the entrepreneur. And where we continue to create a community of mentors who are kind of like-minded and want to give back in this way because they find value in this work and they know it's important to creating that home we all want to live in here in the Chicago area. So
it's a really, really impressive thing that you're doing. And because it not only uplifts the business owners who, let's face it, we entrepreneurs need all the support and compassion that we can get. And you don't get it necessarily. Like, you really have to fight to build your own community. And in some cases, you might be lucky enough to join a group like YPO or EO. And other times you're scraping by and trying to find people who understand and speak the language and get all of the headaches and joys of being in business. But more than that, it's about the impact that each of these businesses can make by creating jobs, by creating new paths. And I think that what we need to remember is that there's room at the table for everyone. There is endless opportunities to create wealth and abundance in businesses. And by extending a hand to the next person and bringing them along and sharing networks and sharing information and helping to build community, it really is to the benefit of everyone.
All of us here. So absolutely. I'm very lucky to have found something that I do for free. I don't get paid for this, and I love it. Somebody is very lucky if they find a career that they would do even if they didn't get paid, and I would do this. So I'm fortunate to have the opportunity.
I feel so lucky to have miraculously been matched with you, and that we built such a great rapport, and you've made such a huge impact in my life just from being a friend. And then also making introductions that have been so helpful and connecting me with people who might give me those insights that maybe I would have otherwise overlooked. So I'm so profoundly grateful. But who is your favorite mentee?
Oh, you are by so much, so many lengths. Absolutely, you are. But Jamila's right there with you. You and Jamila are tops.
We won't tell any of the other ones.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
We'll keep that between us.
So, Bruce, there is a question that I ask everyone on the show. What are you doing to show up in your life unapologetically?
Well, I know you end your shows this way because I've heard this on every
Like
show.
I said,
so I get ready for this. For this
one of
question.
the 10 listeners.
Yeah, no. So you know what? I think at this stage, and I think you know this, I think it is so important to let people know how you feel about them and to share the love and in a very overt way that you have towards the people that are important to you in your life. That to me, is, I guess, what I am doing more today than I have ever done before. So.
That's great.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It is. It's important to express and tell people what you mean to them.
Yeah.
So and on that note, so profoundly grateful for you. So thank you.
Thank you for your letting me into your world and, your journey of being a business owner. So it's been really meaningful to me.
Thank you. So anything else that you'd like to share about entrepreneurship, mentorship, business, life, parenthood that you've been dying to get off your chest? Because I know there's some insights in there.
Oh my gosh. Well, one of the things I try to think about, and I'm not successful, particularly with you when we meet, but I've got to be listening 75% of the time. I talk way too much. Probably the problem is you ask two good questions, and then I start spouting off. So look, we've shared a lot today. I think, as an entrepreneur, it can be lonely. There's no reason to take this journey alone. There are a lot of people who are looking to help, provide advice and guidance, and provide a boost. So it's too difficult to try and do it alone.
So look for the helpers.
Yeah.
Find a Bruce.
Or even there's better Bruces than this Bruce. I am sure.
This is what we'll name the episode.
Yeah, better Bruce.
No, not better. Find a Bruce. Find your Bruce.
Find your Bruce. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much. For those of you tuning in, thank you for being here. And if you have a little seed planted in your mind and are ready to take the steps towards entrepreneurship, know that you aren't alone. Know there are people who are cheering for you. Know that there is a seat at the table. No idea is too big or too small. The most important thing to do is to just start. So take a minute, smash that follow button. If you've got any questions, send us an email at podcast@unapologeticallyyours.com. We want to hear from you. And until next time, go out, make some mischief in the world, jump in puddles, make some noise, call your friends and tell them how important they are to you. And until next time, I'm Ashley, this is Bruce, and we are unapologetically yours.